Hi, everyone. This is Colleen O'Neill here at my Mediation and Beyond YouTube channel, exploring all things relationships. So today I have an honored guest, my dear friend and colleague, Greg Barringer. So let me introduce Greg. Greg's been exploring and sharing enlightened practices for over 30 years, from enhancing the performance of elite athletes to helping organizations manifest their goals to guiding individuals on their personal journey. Greg's been committed to bringing purpose to their personal journey. And he's also been committed to bringing peace and a sense of aliveness to people's lives, and really want to explore that with him. Greg's trained and certified in several lineages of yoga and meditation, including Kripalu Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Thai Yoga Massage, and Vipassana meditation. He holds 2 degrees from Boston University and is the founder of Shakti-Ananda Center for Energy and Bliss. And more information will be in the details on the YouTube channel, but you can find more information about Greg and his offerings at shaktiananda.yoga. So thank you, Greg, for coming on today. I'm really excited to have you. I wanted to ask you, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on was not only for your wisdom and your wealth of knowledge, but I wanted to bring you on today to talk about what, we all hear about the benefits of yoga for our personal lives and, for work-life balance and all those kinds of things. But from my perspective, I really wanted to understand the benefits of yoga for our relationships.
Thank you for asking, Colleen. It's really nice to be here with you, and I appreciate spending a little of our day together and just exploring these topics, which are really dear to me too. As you mentioned at the beginning, I've been practicing yoga and meditation for quite a long time now, but where it's really most interesting to me is in how it can help us in our relationships. And what I mean by that is, obviously we tend to think of yoga as a sort of physical practice of the postures and maybe some breathing and some relaxation techniques. But really it's designed as an enlightenment practice, and as a practice to help us see ourselves and the world more clearly, see our relationships, and to hopefully become more authentic, more genuine. And in that regard, our relationships are an opportunity for that as well. We want to try to be our genuine selves in our relationships, and we want to be accepted and embraced particularly in our intimate relationships in that way. And as you probably know, this turns out to be kind of elusive, right? And so what I'm interested in is how we can use the physical and the meditative aspects of yoga to help either guide us or give us insights into our relationships, and then also how our relationships can help us to become more enlightened ourselves. One of the cliches I've come up with is, if you love somebody who loves you, who you sort of know loves you, and they trigger your stuff, then you found a gift. And the question now is, what are you going to do with that gift? And yoga in many ways is about, how do we deal with the triggers? How do we, when something disturbs us, what do we do with it? And how do we actually learn from that disturbance? How do we grow? How do we create more room and more space for the challenging feelings as well as the good feelings? And so yoga is here to help us build a capacity, essentially, for what I call more aliveness. And so you're building this capacity for more aliveness. Well, the thing about aliveness is it's not all roses, right? Some of the things in aliveness are difficult, are challenging, are scary, are dark, are lustful, are angry. All this stuff is going to come in once we start to build a sacred space for ourselves that doesn't necessarily fit into our egoic notion of who we think we're supposed to be. And so what yoga and meditation are here for is to kind of expand that notion of who we think we're supposed to be. And there's a lot there. I don't know. I mean, I can follow up some more, but I'm happy if.
No, I think a couple of things come to mind is that, I think people go to yoga, to kind of connect with themselves, but I love the point you make about, and I have personally experienced this, and I'm sure many people who will watch this have as well, which is when you're in a relationship and if you're the person who triggers something in somebody else, you kind of get pushed aside because now you're no longer keeping that person happy, right? And so I hear what you're saying, and instead of pushing the person out, use the gift of what they're triggering in you to grow.
Right. That's exactly
right. I mean, after domestic violence and all those kinds of things, but I think people have this search, like chasing their tail, about chasing happiness, and that anything that doesn't make them feel good isn't good and needs to be pushed aside. So I love hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's this idea, it's even the idea of like there's something wrong going either in my relationship or in the world itself. Like people are looking at the coronavirus right now and like, I can't wait until this is over. I hope it's over soon. And like, well, we just don't know when this is going to be over and how long it's going to take. If we're waiting for it to be over in order to be okay, then we could be waiting a very long time. And besides, even the notion of getting back to normal really means getting back to some familiarity, getting back to the past, as opposed to the world is going to be a different place. And how do we actually prepare ourselves and make ourselves available for this different place? Not for what it was before, but what it may be as we go on. And this is the same thing that happens in our relationships, I think, is that we have so many, I'm sure you've talked to people before about this, so many expectations and projections that we put on to our relationship that we don't tend to look at ourselves and look at, well, if I'm unhappy in this situation, what do I need to look at about me? Because most of the time, that person is reflecting back some aspect of ourselves that we just don't want to really look at. I'll give you one example. Is one time I was doing some work at a club, and I was in charge of sort of the operations of it. And this one of the members came up and was complaining about some aspect of it. He wanted more towels or more clean towels or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself that this person was really selfish, that they were just so self-absorbed, and they weren't coming to me to ask, this was a nonprofit organization, how they could help out in any way. They were just wanting more for themselves. And I just started to kind of get a little bit of anger in myself about how selfish and righteous I was getting about it. And so I don't know exactly what happened, but somehow I sat with this for a while, and I realized that what was really upsetting me was my own selfishness, my own sense of wanting what I want when I want it. That kind of like, I want what I want when I want it kind of thing. It's almost like a childlike aspect that is in all of us. And he was just triggering it in me. Like here it is showing up in front of me, and I'm being all self-righteous internally about how selfish this person is being. When actually what was really bothering me was he was bringing up this selfishness in me, that I just want things to work out the way I want them to when I want them to, And so once I sort of saw that, I became much more, amenable, much more compassionate to working with him. Like all of a sudden I kind of saw his request as not all that unreasonable. It was just him acting out his stuff at that time. And so how can I maybe work with him in a way which wasn't as righteous, wasn't as kind of, who are you to tell me kind of thing, And so this is just one little example of how we tend to do this a lot in our relationships, where we're kind of constantly in a judging mode, constantly as I like to say, we are the directors of our own movie, right? And we're doing a casting call, and we're saying, hey, are you going to fit into my movie? Are you going to fit into my movie? And if you don't fit into the movie, then I'm going to reject you.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to vilify you, or I'm going to try to manipulate you. I'm going to, so that you do fit into my movie.
Or I'm going to get a substitute who fits into my movie, even though it's going to be a disaster because I never learned anything about myself.
Right. Yeah. You know, and this is why people have, you know, a lot of, not all the reasons why, but why we have affairs or tryst, you know, things, little emotional affairs or whatever. It's because I don't want to deal with myself, mostly myself, in the context of this relationship. So what can happen is our relationships actually become our yoga, actually become these incredible opportunities for us to see ourselves more clearly and start to accept ourselves and each other as we are. We stop projecting so much of our needs and expectations, and we start just being. And we say, hey, if you want to join me, great. And if you don't want to join me, great. I still love you. You know, and we're stopped caught in this drama about whether it's going to work out or not. It is always working out. Right. Always. You know, it's always working out. Coronavirus, working out. It's all working out.
Right.
You know, and relationships are always working out. It's only when we sort of think, I mean, I'll tell you another quick story because it's just kind of funny and a little bit telling of me, I suppose. But I was in a relationship for quite a while. We broke up. And about a year later, we were on the phone. I can't remember why we were on the phone, but we're on the phone. And she says, you know, I'm still angry. And I go, well, what are you angry about? You know? And she's like, well, you know, it didn't work out. And I kind of paused for a moment. And I realized this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but I just said, well, what do you mean it is working out? You know? And you know, from, you know, I understand from her perspective, she, and, you know, rightfully in her own way was attached to a certain outcome with us, right? That we were going to be together, or we were going to, you know, whatever happily ever after is supposed to look like, right? And so she was still angry that wasn't coming to fruition. And from where I was at that time, a year later, I was like, no, I still love you. I still care about you. If you need something, I will be there for you. But yep. we're not going to cohabitate together, you know, right. And because that didn't work out so well, did it? You know, and so, you know, but again, that's sort of like we come together to learn the lessons that we are meant to learn together, and then maybe that means we're going to stay together. Maybe it means we're going to have some other way of loving each other. I mean, I realize for myself,
the expectation,
right? I mean, I love everybody I've ever loved. I love no less now than I ever did, ever. I mean, I love them just as much as I've ever loved them. Now, do I have the same relationship with them? Am I involved with them at the same level? No, because relationships are going to ebb and flow, and they're going to change, and they're going to make their way. They're working out, right? But the more we're attached to a certain outcome with somebody, we're almost certainly going to have more suffering. Right. So how can we start to hold our intentions lightly? Like, I love you. I'm attracted to you. Let's see where this is going to go. The more projections I put onto that, the more likely it's going to be problematic, as opposed to, let's see where this takes us. And maybe we're together for a while. Maybe we're together for a long time. Maybe we're together for a short time. And this right. notion of it, you know.
Well, I think what happens is you have a bar where your expectation is the bar doesn't get met, so the love gets pulled and the person gets kicked away. Instead of, this is where I'm at, this is either working or it's not working, and I right. still love you just the same.
Right. I still love you.
And we can still be in each other's lives. We don't have to kick to the curb. It doesn't have to be so harsh.
I mean, the other question you can ask yourself, you know, when people say, I don't love you anymore. Well, you could ask yourself, did you really love that person to begin with? Mm-hmm. Or did you love an idea that you had of that person?
Yes.
Like, you know, I had this idea that we were going to be together, that we were going to live together, that we were going to have children together, whatever it might be, right? And because it didn't work out, I don't love you anymore.
Right.
It's like, well, did you ever really love me then? You know, because, you know, were you loving an idea of who you thought I was going to be? Now, I may have been complicit in that because I may have been deluding myself as well into thinking that idea was what I wanted as well. Or that, I mean, I'm not saying that people don't have intentions that are good. They do. It's more like how how wedded are we to those intentions in terms of our caring about each other and that kind of stuff, you know? And things are going to change. That's just the way
Well, I
life
think
is.
it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's like how we respond to the change. Like, are we
Right.
looking back to like get back to where it was, or are we responding to the change by looking at it as an opportunity to continue to grow?
Right. That's
Right.
that's a very good way of looking at it. Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and so earlier, before we started, when we were chatting, you were talking about a course that you, I think that you were starting or had already started.
Well, I developed this course, and I've actually done a few workshops and seminars on it called Intimacy Now. And it was just looking at the different elements of our relationships, and how to bring our mindfulness and yoga to them. Different models of basically how do we connect more deeply with ourselves and others, and ultimately also with our divinity. So I kind of looked at it as three levels. How do we start to love ourselves, appreciate ourselves more? Because I think most of these problems that we have in relationship that stem from our own deep insecurities and sense of unworthiness. I'm not worthy in some way. So first we got to start loving ourselves better. We got to really appreciate ourselves, love ourselves better. Next, there's a whole nother set of skill sets as to how do we love others and how do we allow ourselves to receive love from others. And so I'm sure you spend a lot of time in working with that with people too, is like, how do we actually get these deeper, more authentic senses of connection? And that can be on a physical level, emotional level, spiritual level, sexual level. I mean, there's all these different levels that we can look at in terms of our interaction with each other. And all of them are both interdependent and connected, right? So you could have a very deep emotional connection with somebody and not have a sexual connection with them. You could have a significant sexual connection with somebody and not have a very deep emotional connection. So you look at kind of all these factors and sort of see how can I both balance and strengthen these different aspects of myself in relation to my relationships. And that's really fun to look at that.
Can you ever have all of them in one relationship? Is that something where you're with the way you're looking at things? Is that something that as a single people or even people who are married, that in their relationships they should be wanting all the components? Or can you be with somebody and just have some of the components of like sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes to both. However, it's probably easier to do the latter, which is to separate it out. And because it's probably easier to find somebody with whom you emotionally connect, but you don't necessarily spiritually or sexually connect, or vice versa. Somebody who you have a strong sexual connection with, but they're not very pragmatic on some physical level of being, right? So it's usually easier to find one. The thing that's happened, and you've probably, again, looked at this too, is that we've come to expect so much from our primary relationship. So our primary relationship in which we want to cohabitate, maybe want to raise children, maybe want to build wealth, maybe want to fit in with our extended families. We got all these agendas going on. Oh, and by the way, I want to have intimacy and a sustained sort of sex life that is vibrant, right? Like these, I'm reading a lot of Esther Perel lately.
Oh, I love her.
You know, and the forces of domesticity tend to subjugate both our spiritual and sensual lives. Okay, so the forces that keep a domestic program going, especially in a puritanical material culture, which we live in here in the Northeast, right? I mean, there's so much that demands, and so much repression that demands, that that actually having a spiritual / sensual, sexual relationship, it's very difficult to do those two things. Now, it's not impossible, but you have to have somebody who is pretty, honestly, just pretty enlightened. Because to be able, and not only pretty enlightened, but also has that pragmatic side as well. Because to run your household here in Fairfield County takes a lot of pragmatic skills, and takes, it takes resource skills. You got to be making a good, decent living. You got to, do all these pragmatic things. Oh, and by the way, you have to have this spiritual, sensual self that that not only have you developed, but you're continuing to develop independently of all these pragmatic skills. And so, these are quite, it can be done, but it's only going to be done consciously. To do it, just by happenstance is almost impossible. Like, oh, I just happen to be incredibly enlightened and sensual. Oh, and I have these pragmatic skills and I have all these other things as well. You can do it, but you have to do it pretty much concertedly. Like you're gonna say, oh, I need to work on these different aspects of myself, and how do I keep developing those aspects of myself? The other aspect of it is that, again, most of the domestic motivators have to do with fulfilling our security needs. Like, I want to have a safe home. I want to have a safe home for my children, which, these things make sense, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things that drive around safety, status, and wealth. So it's like, okay, this is our primary function: is safety, status, wealth, getting the kids, as I used to say, getting the kids into, elite level colleges. That's like sort of the program, and so, that takes a ton of work and a ton of focus. And also it's primarily security based. So it's primarily, how do we kind of keep building this sort of sense of okayness around material security? Intimacy and sensuality and spirituality is not all that interested in that stuff. It's not security based. It's ethereal based. It's take me on a journey, take me to places I haven't been before. Yes. Put me in situations where I actually do feel a little uncomfortable, a little risky. That's where the spiritual, sensual, sexual realm lives in terms of, erotic realm. It lives in the unknown. It lives in the adventure. It lives in, edginess, right? And so that's a kind of counter idea to what fuels domesticity. Right. And so, you've got these two things that are kind of working side by side. In most of our culture, domesticity wins. Right. And it's just things like, I'll give you an example. A lot of married people that I know don't invite me, I'm a single person, to their social gatherings.
Oh, amen.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is that I don't get in? They like me. They'll come and take my classes and, that kinds of stuff, but they don't invite me to their social activities. Yep. Why do you think that is?
I'm in the same boat. I have a lot of friends, married and or single, but the marrieds go out with marrieds and singles go out with singles. And I think there's a threat to that, to bring in the other single woman into the crowd, because I think people feel a threat, or bring a man in that the men might feel a threat. And it's just like you have these little cohorts, and right. we move in society, the divorcees don't hang out with the married people, because goodness knows a divorced person might infect the married people. Right.
I think this is a huge issue right here. Okay. Because just think of, especially like when I really feel for the divorced people. Okay. So people get divorced, and then their married friends eschew them. That's painful. That is, not only do have you gone through the pain of getting divorced, which is painful, but now you're going through this like separation with these friendships who were part of your life, because now you're perceived as some kind of threat to the domesticity system, right? You've got this domesticity system is prevailing over the whole thing, and so in order to maintain that, we have to eschew anything that doesn't fit in with that movie, right? They're doing their director movie thing, and you now are perceived as a threat to that movie that they're trying to create, all of which is an illusion, by the way. So
yes, absolutely.
It's an illusion, but they're into it. So it's, to them, it's not. And So, but here's the thing I go back to, if you want to have actually more sensuality in your life, let's just run this scenario, which I was thinking about earlier today. You show up at a party with the married couples and you start to talk to one of the husbands or maybe one of the women. I mean, it could be anybody, right? But you're feeling a connection with them. You're feeling this like, oh, we're connecting. And maybe there's even a little bit of sexual energy there. Maybe there's a little bit of flirting. Hey, you look nice in that dress, whatever it is, right? Now, if you're the spouse and you're watching this, right, you see this, you have several options here. Now, most people will take option number one, which is I'm going to get jealous and I'm going to sort of look at this as something not good is going on here. And, oh, this is threatening in some way. And you're going to decide, oh, I'm going to deploy my manipulation tactics. That's what I'm going to do here. And as we drive away and drive home to our house, I am going to chastise my spouse for having that connection. I'm going to make them feel bad by, oh, I can't believe you were talking to her, and oh, you touched her, and all that, whatever it is. I've been there. I'm sure you've probably been there.
Absolutely.
But you could take another tack. You can take another choice. In that moment, what you could see is your spouse, that man, maybe, whoever, connecting with someone else on a somewhat intimate level, meaning they're genuinely connecting. There's an energy there. There's a spark there. And you could say to yourself, wow, you know what? I don't blame her. My spouse is hot and he's a really good looking guy and he's really interesting. And wow, you know what? I'm kind of getting sort of turned on right now. This, I could get, if you start to suppress and depress the sensuality and sexuality that's going on all the time, by the way, it's going on all the time, right? But if we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge it, then we are suppressing it in ourselves and we're suppressing it in our primary relationship. You could go back home with your husband or, and have a fun time with that. Hey, did you find her attractive? Yeah, you know what? She was kind of attractive. And the next thing you know, you're both turned on,
Yes, yes.
There's all kinds of opportunities in there to enjoy ourselves and have more aliveness. I go back to the aliveness, right? This, when you want more aliveness, you want more vibrance in your life, you've got to be willing to stretch yourself a little outside your comfort zone, right? So, I've got I got three things that I've decided I want in life. I want peace, I want connection, and I want aliveness. And there are things that I can do to practice each of those. I've got my spiritual practices for, finding peace, finding okayness with whatever is. I've got my practices for connecting deeply with others, like listening and being present and those kinds of things. But aliveness is interesting because aliveness actually requires me to be uncomfortable a little bit, to be outside my comfort zone, to find the things that scare me a little bit and actually move towards them. Don't eschew them. Don't kick them out of my movie and say, you can't be in my movie because you kind of make me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Actually say, no, let's bring it on. Bring on a little bit of uncomfortable. I can deal with a little uncomfortable. I am strong enough. I am okay enough in myself that I can take it on. And if this person who's flirting with my husband is bringing up some stuff for me, this is now, again, I'm getting triggered. Who's responsible for me getting triggered? Me, not them. Right. Not them flirting together. It's me that's getting triggered. So I'm responsible for this. What do I want to do with it? I can either vilify it or I can take it as an opportunity for growth and for expansion. Because the fact of the matter is that those two people, your husband and this person, are having that connection. It is the truth. And you can deny the truth or try to suppress the truth, but it is there. And so now you can decide, how do I want to be with this truth? Do I want to embrace this truth and incorporate it? Or do I want to pretend like it's not happening and vilify it so it doesn't happen again?
I've had people in my office in the past where someone would say, well, you were looking at so-and-so funny. And someone would say, well, but look who I went home with. Like I went home with you. So like you could take that same energy like you're talking about and go home and use it together. Right. And I think people miss the boat because their ego gets in the way and their fear. And then they've missed an opportunity where they could have really heightened their relationship.
Right. And so, the other part of domesticity is, that might not be the best word for it, because it sounds a little bit condescending, but it's not meant to be,
Yeah.
is that it also relies on a lot of predictable outcomes. So again, when something feels like I'm not sure where this is going, we tend to, again, push it out of the movie, And so if we want to have, again, this is where yoga comes in. If we want to have more peace, connection, aliveness in our lives, we have to kind of expand our capacity for not feeling always safe, always comfortable, always, we're not always moving towards safety, comfort, control. Sometimes we're opening ourselves up. If it's truly not life-threatening, then do I need to shut down to this? If it is life-threatening, or as you said, if it's truly abusive, then okay, we need to do some things to control that situation, right? But if it's not abusive and it's not life-threatening, then it's just, this is just uncomfortable. Well, let me see if I can be with uncomfortable,
Yeah.
And the beauty is, as you're able to be with things that are uncomfortable, you will start to transcend them. They will become, not only will they not become, you'll become okay with them or neutral to them or maybe even open to them, but other things will start to work that way as well. Pema Chodron has this, a great Buddhist teacher. She has this analogy where she said, when you first start your spiritual journey, you feel like you're in the ocean and it's just buffeting you and you're getting knocked around and you're getting your head in the sand and you got sand in your swimsuit and everything, it just feels like a mess, right?
Right.
But then she says, like, after a while, after doing these practices for a while, you're in the ocean. And the ocean hasn't changed at all. The ocean's still coming in, but you feel like, I can just go up and down with the ocean, and I'm kind of riding the wave, and I'm not getting buffeted all over the place. I'm now learning how to give the ocean its due and give the fact that it's constantly changing its due, and I'm not fighting it. I'm not resisting the changing ocean. I'm actually moving with it, and that's really where yoga and relationship starts to come together, is we give our relationships more room. We give the people in them more room to be who they are. We stop needing people to be different than the way they are. As a matter of fact, we try to encourage them to be more of who they are, be more of who you are, because we don't need them to be a certain way. We're okay as we are. And this is, again, the big part of yoga. I'm at peace with myself as I am, the world as it is, and others as they are. That's one of my primary mantras.
Can you repeat that?
I'm at peace with myself as I am, the world as it is, and others as they are.
Nice. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful mantra, and I use it all the time because stuff comes up and I get triggered, and then I'm like, let me use that mantra. That would be helpful right now. And it really helps me to just regain my sense of groundedness, okayness, and just recognize that, okay, I'm having a trigger right now. I'm feeling insecure or whatever it is, but I am actually okay. It's my ego that's feeling insecure, really, which is a part of me, so I can't eschew it. And, but I don't have to react to it. Right. I don't have to change the situation.
The choice.
I have a choice in this moment, and having that choice is incredibly empowering. And so.
Yeah, no, that is. And so we have a choice in how we enter the relationship. We have a choice of how we are in the relationship. And then we have a choice of how we exit that relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And just because you exit doesn't mean there's no relationship, right? You just exit it how it was.
It just changes the understandings. It changes the boundaries.
Yep.
As I said, like, you can really, again, I think people often throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to relationships, but we don't have to. I mean, it's really not that hard to start. You just love people for who they are. You just sort of say, well, everybody's got their limitations. Everybody's changing. Sometimes we move together. Sometimes we move apart. This is all, again, imagine the ocean and the tide. The tide is coming in. The tide is going out. Trying to fight the tide is not going to be fun. So But the tide is going to happen, and that's the same thing with people. You know, one of the things that a little cliche that I've come up with as well is that just look at us all as we're all just visiting, right? We're not actually, this notion of we're going to be together forever is, again, another delusion. We are visiting together, you and I, and maybe we're going to just visit together for an hour. Maybe we're going to visit together for a week, maybe a month, maybe a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But at some point, one of us or both of us is going to leave, you know? So, you know, it's inevitable that somebody's going to leave. And so knowing that is not, we don't have to fight against that. We can just sort of accept it as part of the dynamic of how life relationships work. We come together, we stay together for a while, we grow together, and maybe we keep going in parallel for quite a long time, but it's, you know, at some point somebody's leaving, you know? And so when we look at it that way.
A time in a season, and it's what you do with the time during the season, right? I mean, because you don't know how long you're here.
That's right.
And
we have no idea.
Nope.
And which when we actually really embrace that, this is then part of the yoga spiritual culture as well. They spend quite a bit of time contemplating death, which I know most people don't want to talk about. But the reason why we do that is so that we are more alive, and so that we appreciate our aliveness more, and we are more loving. Because, you know, let's face it, anytime we leave each other, we part, we don't know when we're going to see that person again, you know? And so, you know, and how do you want to leave? Do you want to leave with a note of loving kindness, with a note of appreciation, regardless of what's happened? Maybe you've had a big fight, you know, which happens. I mean, we're going to have fights. But how do you want to part company? Because you just never know. When,
well, you know, that's always been a huge part of my life, is how I say goodbye to somebody, whether even it's I'm just leaving and I'll be back in an hour, but saying goodbye, and because you never know. And I was always, people would say, well, why do you live like, you know, in such a negative space? And I'm like, no, it's really just the opposite. I'm appreciating you right now. I don't know if I'll be able to appreciate you in an hour. I'm hoping I can appreciate you in an hour, but I'm just appreciating this right now.
Right.
And acknowledging it. Right?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Colleen. Yeah, that they just acknowledging that here we are, we have this moment. How can we love each other as best we can? And again, every relationship's different. Love shows up in different ways with different people, but we just, what else are we going to do? That's when you, after a while, you start to realize, well, what else am I going to do? But try to love people when I'm with them, you know? Yeah. And, you know, and if we just kind of keep in check, not to recognize that we don't have our own expectations, our own desires, right? But just recognize that the more attached I am to those expectations and desires, the more difficult in many ways it's going to be to connect deeply with this person. Because Ram Dass said, whenever you have an agenda with somebody, they on some level will have resistance. They on some level will have some protection up. So if you really want to be intimate with somebody, you got to drop your agenda. You know, it's kind of like, sounds like counterintuitive, but I really want to be with you. I really want to be your lover or whatever it is. You actually have to drop that whole agenda in order to really get a genuine connection with somebody. You know, otherwise you're satisfying each other's kind of egoic needs in that moment, but you're not necessarily connecting on a deeper level of knowing your own kind of oneness and your own divinity. And so this is why there's that third level that I talked about. So you have the self, loving the self, loving another. And the third aspect is becoming love, becoming this sort of divine incarnation of love that is regardless of agenda with anything or anyone. So we start to actually become what we seek. We're seeking to be loved, but ultimately on a spiritual level, we can become what we seek, which is to just be love. And then it's like, hey, if you want to join me in this hot tub of love, great. If you don't, I'm still here in the hot tub. So, you know, I'm perfectly fine. You know, and again, most people, when they hear that, they kind of like, it's not really all that interesting to them. It sounds kind of lonely. Like, oh, well, I don't want that. I want to be with somebody, right? But actually, when you start to taste it a little bit, it's pretty awesome. It's like, because you're just, again, you are happy with wherever you're at. You're at peace with wherever you're at, and you are welcoming other people into that, but you're also not dependent on other people being a part of it, you know? So it's a place of a lot of joy and freedom, and sometimes you're alone, but you learn how to actually be really good at that, like really starting to appreciate our aloneness and our existential aloneness. Like on a certain level, we are alone, always. And so how do we start to appreciate that truth? And again, in doing so, we become, again, more present. It's almost like you were saying before, like, you know, when I'm saying goodbye to somebody, I want to make sure that it's as amenable and loving as possible. When we really embrace our own aloneness, it makes us not only appreciate ourselves more, but also appreciate others more. We're able, our level of presence goes up. We're able to really be more.
I actually think the pandemic, at least for me, and I'm sure for other people too, has provided me that very opportunity. Like to kind of slow down, to, you know, I don't have a problem personally being alone, but to kick it up to another level of being alone, and get in touch with myself and really get quiet and find more purpose and meaning, and look at your relationships and look who's coming in and who's not there, and how do I spend my time? Like, time has just kind of like, wow, where was I spending my time that I really didn't need to, but it makes you pause, not in judgment of self, but in learning.
Yeah.
So I've really appreciated the opportunity, as sad as it is for the pandemic, obviously, but I've utilized this time to grow in a whole nother level that I would never probably have taken the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, as a matter of fact, I had much more anxiety as we came out of the pandemic as I did going into it. You know, when we were closing down and having to kind of hunker down, I was kind of like, oh, this is pretty nice. I kind of like this. And again, as you sort of said, spending more time with myself, diving into my practices as we came out with all the kind of ambiguity, you know, people have, we all have a certain tolerance, you know, for ambiguity. It's just, and I think we're still in that, obviously, right now. People are anxious because of the uncertainties, you know, when kids are going to go back to school, or, you know, what's going to happen? How long is this going to go on for? So being compassionate with that, but it takes energy, you know, and it does, but I appreciate that, you know, that time that we've had to kind of be with ourselves was really kind of precious in a way. And I think also helped us to appreciate the people who we love and who love us even more, you know, so.
Yeah, it was really sacred time. So, but thank you, Greg. I could stay on here all day and chat. Like,
no, I know, I appreciate
it's my favorite thing to do.
Well, I want to thank you too, Colleen. I really appreciate what you're doing, and you know, working with people to help them in their relationships, and, you know, trying to just, I think people need, well, we all need, you know, some comfort and some companionship during this time. And so I've been finding that, you know, the yoga and the meditation has been really helpful for people just to be able to take care of themselves and then ultimately help take care of each other. So I want to thank you too for reaching out to me and letting me join you on this journey.
Absolutely. And I look forward, I'll have you back, because there's so many dimensions of this that I think are so helpful for people in relationships or not in relationships, but how to really benefit from the deeper dives of yoga. You know, yoga just is one of those terms, but there's so much richness to it. It's not just doing a downward dog. It's not just throwing your mat out. Like, there's so much more to it. than that. And I think taking people on that journey is so important in these kind of small, isolated moments like we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can even do like a specific little meditation or something like that if you'd like.
Absolutely. So I appreciate your time, Greg. Thank you so much. Stay safe, and we'll be back in touch.
Great.
All right. Namaste.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Namaste. Yeah. Mm-hmm.